Welcome to another video. In today's video, we are dispelling some of the false narratives that are associated with these areas that I live in. I've heard all kinds of crazy stuff since I've lived out here. There's people that think that this whole area out here used to be big tall forests like you find over there in that Cascade Range, right? Like big super tall pine trees, right? And that just simply isn't true. Okay, I've been all over Oregon forests, from up and down, all over. Old growth forests that are still standing, old growth forests that have been cut down. I've been in forests where there's old growth forest stumps, and then the next generation of stumps, and then the next generation of stumps. So I've been in forests that have been logged 3 times, okay? There's no stumps out here. The topsoil is simply not deep enough to sustain these big tall trees. They never could have made it out here. Sure, can you bring one out here and plant it and get it to grow if you put it in the right spot? Most likely, yes, okay? But would they have naturally been over here? No, not even close. The topsoil is so shallow this far east that they simply would not grow, okay? Now that brings us to the junipers, okay? There is no stumps from junipers either. I mean, in this entire area where I live, that's called Juniper Acres, 250 years ago, there was maybe 5 or 10 juniper trees in this entire area, okay? Now, there's probably millions just in this area, right? I mean, they're bad, it's bad, and it needs to be dealt with, okay? So one of the biggest problems with this juniper sage infestation is the fact that it is not sequestering carbon. There is sequestered carbon, but overall, if you take an acre of land and you go out there and you look at that acre of land, you'll see the majority of the land that has had the junipers on there for 50, 100 or longer years. What happens is you have a higher percentage of uncovered ground than covered ground, okay? And every time the wind blows, it's blowing that dirt up into the atmosphere. And you literally can see mounds higher around all the sage and the juniper and the grass clumps that are left, and see how much the wind has blown away the topsoil. I mean, it's a very bad problem that's been going on for a really long time, okay? So what the biggest problem with this entire area is, and I don't know which one of these is worse, so I guess they're both tied for first and second place. One is overgrazing and 2 is underburning, okay? So it's supposed to be grasslands, the majority of grasslands, that has fire that goes through it every 3 to 5 years. That hasn't happened in a couple hundred years pretty much. So what we have now is just putting more carbon into the atmosphere than it's sequestering down, as proven by the giant vacant areas of ground, because Mother Nature covers ground, okay? It just doesn't leave it uncovered. And it also doesn't do these huge monocrops, okay? This is the problem. And now the problem has gotten so bad that there is safety issues involved, okay? These fires that come out of juniper and sage are 1,000 times more dangerous than a grass fire. So which would normally have been just a part of nature, the grass burning every 3 to 5 years at some point in the year, depending on what time of the year the lightning freaking started the fire, would be depending on how much of that smoke that the fire was producing was steam, how much it actually was fire, smoke. You look around where I've burned stuff, and if I have burned juniper, sage, the fire gets so hot that a whole different variety of species comes in to replace or to cover the ground than when I just burn through and it just was like grass that gets burned, then the grass just kind of comes right back up, right? So the fires are significantly different between a fire that happens in grasslands versus a fire that happens in juniper and sage, okay? Now, the firefighters are overwhelmed. The fire season is getting longer. The juniper and the sage being there exacerbates that entire situation. So just ignoring it like has been happening for the last couple hundred years is just going to make things worse, okay? By a long shot. Like if it is continued to be ignored, then what's going to happen is you're going to have a dust bowl event and or massive fire events that are darn near uncontrollable, okay? Now, the benefit beyond the safety is the environmental, okay? And maybe even a bigger deal is getting the carbon that's already in those trees, harvesting them, chipping down the small junipers and the sage. Okay, so now all that carbon is either taken away and turned into some kind of building product or some kind of art or creative or whatever, okay? Or maybe used, ideally, if people are heating them they're using rocket stove technology, okay, which puts almost no carbon into the atmosphere and gets all the heat out of the wood, okay? So we get people start to transform their wood stoves into rocket stoves, and then burning the juniper becomes a net positive. On a certain scale, certain size and quality of juniper should be used for some sort of building products, okay? Now, the process of getting to this level, okay, is a combination of getting the junipers, the sage, and all that I've explained, but there's also a soil component, a disturbing of the soil that is kind of important. So in areas around my property where I have just done this by hand, I'm not getting the results where I've done it with the machine. So with a backhoe, floating every square inch of the property, which I think building custom machinery with giant elongated wheels that are made out of steel instead of rubber, and those steel, so the machine to take care of this is driven on wheels or tracks that have a function of aeration. Okay, so as the machine is going through harvesting the junipers, chipping the small junipers, chipping the small sage, while it's rolling through doing all that, its propulsion mechanism is disturbing the soil. Okay, and I think that will be perfect. Like that combination of chipping the things down and then basically an aeration process, which ideally we get one machine that just two machines that just goes through. I mean, we have all the individual machines now, but to solve this problem by burning diesel in the machines we have right now is not really a good idea. We need to make the machines run off hydrogen that we're getting from solar, converting the water into hydrogen from solar power, and then run these machines on the hydrogen, okay? This just needs to happen, okay? We need to do this instead of doing the whole World War III thing. This will be a much better idea. We'll save the planet, we'll sequester carbon, and we'll leave a better environment for the people who are coming after us. Because right now, the people that were before us have left just devastation. I can't emphasize enough how bad the situation is. You literally have fire hazard, counterproductive to global climate change, and it's just a catastrophe waiting to happen on a much larger scale, right? When this stuff starts to just kill 100, and the dust storms that are going to come out of here, if it gets to that point, at that point, people will go, oh, we got to do something, and what are we going to do? And if you're just and you're watching this video and you're already at Dust Bowl level, I'm sorry, I tried, I'm doing my best. So, and the biggest problem with humans is they feel as though they need to be making money to do anything. Like, oh, give me money or I'm not going to do it. Weyerhaeuser just needs to come up with a way to convert these trees into OSB. John Deere needs to make this machine that I'm talking about so we can just clean this up. Then once you have land like this, junipers and sage give you zero potential for any kind of profit making or any kind of, this grass that's right here, this is animal fodder. Okay, I can run chicken tractors through here. I could put a cow on here. And by using intensive grazing techniques, all this can just be maintained with animals, sequestering carbon into the animals, and then the humans eat the animals. Wonderful. And it makes, every time the animals get passed over in intensive graze, it makes the topsoil better. It makes the grass thicker. It locks the topsoil in place. It prevents the Dust Bowl. Okay? Now, we have an organization here in Central Oregon called the Oregon Natural Desert Association. Completely wrong. Everything they say is wrong and they need to be stopped. They need to wake up, realize that what they need to be doing is what I am talking about. Okay? They need to get on the page of the junipers and the sage are upcoming ecological catastrophe, and it's not a desert. Quit trying to save it in desert form because it's not a desert, it's not a high desert. You want to know what a high desert is? It's above timberline. It's the Himalayas. Okay, it's a high desert. We're at like 1,500 feet here. That's not even a half of what Colorado, whatever place in Colorado is like mile high. Denver, okay? So to call us high desert is so freaking ignorant. I can't even emphasize that point enough that it is just ignorance. High deserts are above timberline where nothing grows. Desert, nothing grows in desert. This is grasslands. Okay, and we need to start calling it that because this is very important. Because the grass is what was here 250 years ago. The junipers weren't, you can tell, because when you cut them down and count their rings, you can't find one over 200-ish years old. Good luck if you do. You're finding like a needle in a haystack. Yes, there are old junipers that probably are 1,000 years old somewhere around here. But it wasn't in just so solid that that's all you can see for freaking miles and miles. Literally all you can see is junipers and sage, right? When they get big fires like up on the mountain up there, you see it burn it all off. Well, that is not a good way to go about it. Because when you just burn it off, you're putting all that carbon back up into the atmosphere, 100%. Now you lost any benefit you may have gained by growing those trees in the first place, okay? And not to mention, the fire isn't replacing the lack of animal inputs, which is the other, okay, so this is all the number 1 and 2 biggest problem, overgraze and under fire, but overgraze, but then grazing, intensive grazing, is actually what's supposed to be happening. Now I have right here where I live, there's 3 different types of animals that just are in a caged area. There's horses, there's donkeys, and there's alpacas, Okay? Now, I've observed pronghorn antelope down in the pivot fields. Now, remarkably enough, the pronghorn antelope are actually eating the stuff that is all over in the horses and the donkeys. What the horses and the donkeys won't eat, the antelope is. And the antelope isn't eating like the lush grass in the middle of the pivot. It's eating this yellow stuff that is like that right there on the edge of the grass, right? Okay, so these pronghorn antelopes and deer and elk and maybe some other kinds of animals, they used to be wandering around and eating and trampling and doing their whole thing, okay? That is a big part of the long-term maintenance of the area. You can't just do nothing. That's what happens. That's how you get the junipers and the sage, okay? And you don't have to do something, but you have to enable the animals, herds of animals, tightly packed, grazing, intensively grazing. Cows work as long as you have them in packs, being run by like cowboys, have them moved where they just don't wander around and do their whole thing, okay? So, and another big aspect of this entire situation is the ants, okay? So I have these buckets that I move around on my property to kill off the ants. That works good for property owners that are there walking around. But when you start to think about cleaning up huge swaths of public lands, you're not going to have somebody walking around moving buckets. So a biodegradable one-off, you see an ant colony as the workers that are doing this work, and pow, they just drop one little cup or whatever that's biodegradable that can just be left there. The ants will go, they'll get it, they'll be wiped out, the cup will break down, and nature will fix the ant damage. I've got more than enough evidence that the plants come back into the ant holes eventually, especially if you knock them down. So, all right. That's the plan for saving Central Oregon from a Dust Bowl catastrophe. Okay? I'm calling it right now. I've been making observations on this subject for 4 years. I've been doing research for years. This is just 1 year, a little over 1 year, and I've got this results. I've got results over there that I've been working on for years that are just mind-blowing. So I know 100% that I'm correct. Okay, there's not a debate here, right? I'm right, the junipers are wrong, the sage is wrong, ONDA is wrong. Fix it. Peace. Have a great day.